Hello, Motor Ride World fans, and welcome to another Bike Tyre Guru segment with myself, Rob Portman. And this time, I'm joined by Ryan Robertson from Autocycle Centre, who are the official distributors of Michelin motorcycle tyres here in South Africa. And this time, we're going to have a look. We're going to stay with the adventure bike tyre theme that we have the past couple of episodes, delving into everything, giving you as much information as possible. This time, we're going to have a look at the range of Michelin tyres available. So they've got the Anarchy Adventure and the Anakee Wild. And I've brought Ryan in here to explain the differences between the two, because adventure and wild sound like the exact same thing to a sports bike rider like myself. So Ryan, thank you for joining us. I'm going to start with the Anarchy Adventure first. What kind of technology do Michelin use to make this tire as great as it is? Because it really has become a big player and a big contender for the tire to fit on any adventure bike.
No, absolutely, Robin. Thank you for the invite to come and join you guys. The primary technology that we've got in this tyre is 2CT and 2CT Plus. For those that don't know what that is, it's Michelin's dual compound technology. So on the front tyres, you've got your 2CT, and on your rear tyres, you've got the 2CT Plus. Nice thing about that, it gives you the durability on the center line of the tire when you're doing long trips, which we all know, the adventure guys, there's long expanses between the fun riding.
Yeah.
So it gives you that durability, but when you hit the corners or whatever, it gives you that traction that you're looking for in the corners as well. Then the second thing is obviously a completely overall profile on the tire, which has improved both the stability in a straight line and cornering stability as well, which gives you that better ride and that better feel in the corners for, again, getting to where you're going to go and have the fun off-road. The other thing is the tread void ratio that they've applied to this tire it makes it the perfect dual purpose tire.
Yes,
So,
yes.
it gives you good traction in the wet, it gives you great traction in the dry, and with that void ratio, it is designed specifically for off-road use, mud and sand as well, but to give you that durability over the long trip, getting where you're going. And again, from a commuting point of view, if you are using, a lot of us use our adventure bikes to commute on a daily basis, gives you that durability that you are looking for. The nice thing to notice is with that stability, with a new profile on the tire, it's actually approved by BMW for their 1250 GS as well. So, it's one of the biggest selling adventure bikes in the country. And, as I say, if it's good enough for BMW,
You can't argue with that. So what is the split then on this tire? We hear 60, 40, 20, 80.
We'd probably classify it as around an 80-20 split. It could potentially go down to 70-30 possibly, but it is more designed for the guys that are looking for something that's going to give them durability, going to give them stability on the road, but will perform when you go into that off-road situation where you are going to play on the weekends with the mates,
Okay, perfect. So the next question I have for you is, I believe it's an OEM fitment on a number of bikes out of the factory. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. It's the nice thing is you've got the 1250 GS, as I mentioned.
Yes.
It's OEM on that as it comes out of the factory. The KTM 790 Adventure and the 390 is OEM fitment there. One of them out of Good Seas, and then a whole range of Triumph motorcycles as well, OEM out of the factory. So, they really have done their homework, and the suppliers have gotten on board because it does work. It's that good a tire.
Tried and tested then. What are the recommended pressures and speed ratings and load? Because that is something that a lot of people get wrong. And, that's why we've kind of put these shows together, because everyone has their own different opinion on it. Do you follow what the manufacturer says? Do you follow what the tire supplier says? Do you follow your own thing? Do you up? Do you down? I mean, what is the recommended on this, which, as you said, is the more road focused, but at the same time has the off-road capability?
Michelin always sticks to manufacturers' recommendations. They know what they're doing.
They've developed the bike with the tire on. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, as we know, tires form part of your suspension.
Sure.
So to run them at a pressure that is different to what the manufacturer provides alters the bike's
handling
capabilities and what it does and how it performs in certain situations.
Sure.
So we always recommend sticking to the manufacturer's recommendations on that. And then obviously on this tire, being a slightly more road biased tire, it's a V and H rating, the two options. Obviously in your smaller profiles,
yes, for your 390s, yeah.
Absolutely. It's the H rating, which is 210 k's an hour. And then all the rest is 240 with a V rating. So it is for your new fast hyper sport adventure bikes, because that's a 1290
That's
is
what they
in
are these
essence,
days. Yeah.
it can cope with those kind of speeds as well.
Okay, and then load. I mean, people adventure bike. You put the missus on the back. You take your whole house with you.
Absolutely, and I mean there again, you've got to make sure that the load rating is obviously designed for adventure bikes in all the different profiles. But the key thing there is for the guys that do go off road and tend to drop your pressures in the dirt, you need to remember to bring them back up to pressure when you get onto the tar, because a lot of the guys are in a rush to get home and they're up to the 240 odd. That, I mean, because we're all law-abiding citizens, so none of us do that. But and unfortunately, the flex in the carcass is where the heat buildup comes from, and then you start compromising or have a potential of compromising the carcass or the actual tire. So you have to run at the recommended pressures when you're on the tar and you do it at speed.
So what is the general recommended pressure on these, on the big adventure bikes?
Well, it depends again, manufacturer to manufacturer. So, I don't want to give specific numbers there because each manufacturer will vary. Your 1250 BMW versus your 1290 KTM will be slightly different pressures, but we just say keep to the manufacturer's pressures there.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move on to the... let's finish off with the Anarchy Adventure then. What application is this best suited to?
Yeah, we have touched on it. Obviously, it's for the guys that are using the bike to commute or for long trips, that kind of thing, where you're doing a small percentage of your ridings actually in the dirt. Although that said, with the technologies and the silica technologies that they've got in these tires, the nice thing is that it actually works really well in the dirt for most conditions. It's only when you're really in extreme mud conditions that you need something that's a little bit more aggressive.
More rutted and thicker,
So it's mostly for that kind of split where you're doing a lot of tar road riding, but you're looking for something that works well in the wet.
Okay, so that is your general adventure rider here in South Africa that buys a GS. Does a lot more tar road riding than actual dirt, but it has the dirt capabilities. So that's your Anarchy Adventure. We're now going to cover the Anarchy Wild. So now, obviously, Wild being a little bit more wild, the dirty stuff, the more dirty stuff. So what kind of technology do Michelin use to make the Anarchy Wild such a great tire?
Okay, so the key technology again, and there's always the main, well, not the main technology, but something that's
key feature.
Yeah, it's the first knobbly that Michelin have developed with radial X technology. So the key thing there is again the feel on the ride, the stability and cornering, and that actual with the radial technology, it's actually the whole ride and experience is what Michelin focus on. It's not just about function. They want their rider's experience to be a great experience as well. And that radial technology gives you the comfort that you are looking for on an adventure bikes. Again, for your longer trips and that kind of thing, if you are going to do it, because let's face it, there are large expanses where you have to work on tarmac, and you want a comfortable and a good ride on that.
So, I mean, the Wild, I would say, is a little bit more adaptive, maybe, to all kinds of conditions, especially on the dirty stuff. Like you said, I mean, if I look at it, it looks almost like a motocross tire to me, to the general guy. So I would feel a lot more confident going Bobby Yarns, all those kind of places on that, knowing that, cool, I've got my gravel, but as soon as I get into the more trail and motocross enduro style sections, I can still get my GS or my 1290 KTM through there.
Well, that is the nice thing about that. You can go and do Sabi because of the radial technology in the tire. It handles well on the tar, but you can then turn off and go up a mountain and it works. It's an aggressive tire. It's for your mud and sandy conditions, works very, very well in those environments. And it's designed specifically for that, where you're looking for, the South African adventure rider, where we are aggressive, we ride in aggressive conditions, we ride single track. It's not a lot of European countries where the guys will use the bike in those kind of scenarios, and that is what this tire is designed for. But again, you got to bear in mind that there are limitations. It is a knobbly at the end of the day.
So you've got to take that limitation into account when you get out on the road.
Absolutely.
Again. Okay, so what are the recommended pressures and speed ratings and load on that kind of tire? And I mean more specifically, obviously load on the dirty stuff, but more specifically, this is where people sometimes get this kind of application wrong when they're on the road. Like you said, from the adventure tire, a lot of guys deflate for off-road and forget to inflate for road. What is the difference there between on the Wild now?
Okay, now again, on the Wild, obviously, you are running lower pressures, generally speaking, when you're in the dirt, because it is for aggressive conditions and more for harsher conditions. So on that tire, the nice thing is, when you're off-road, you can reduce the pressure slightly. That radial X technology, again, it provides you with a design on the carcass, increased resistance to puncturing and that kind of thing. So you can actually run at slightly lower pressures in the dirt. But again, manufacturers' pressures when you get back onto the tar works. So we always recommend again that you inflate before you get onto the tar, and you make sure that you run it at the correct pressures and the manufacturer's pressures as well. Just obviously on the other thing, the compound that they use on that tire allows again more durability on the tarmac, getting to where you want to go, but at the same time giving you that traction in those harsh off-road conditions. So another big thing where the guys miss the bus is bedding in.
Sure.
You know, it's a process that has to be done, especially with an aggressive tire like this. And, you know, Michelin recommended on all their tires, not just the Anarchy Wild. It's about 100 kilometers of easy braking, easy acceleration, and lower lean angle. So you're not pushing the tire to its limits, and you've got to do that for 100 Ks to get the maximum out of this tire.
Okay.
You know, you often get guys that'll go and they'll buy the tire, they'll fit it for a trip, they'll get on fully loaded and go and bang it flat out to get wherever they're going. And that becomes an issue. It does affect the durability of the tire, and you have to follow the manufacturer's recommendation to actually run it bedded in for about 100 kilometers before you go and do that. You know, we often say to the guys at least 5 heat cycles as well, where, you know, popping around in town that you just let the tire warm up slowly, easy, that you're not putting it under too much pressure. And, you know, I ran the tire on an 800 adventure bike where I did the proper bedding in process, and riding it extremely hard, I got over 5,000 Ks on the tire. So for an aggressive tire like that, it does give you the mileage if you look after the tire as well, and if you follow the proper bedding in processes.
It's like anything, you know, you buy your motorbike, you run it in to get more longevity out of it.
Absolutely.
So I think that's, like you said, that's about a lot of guys miss with not just adventure tires, with most motorcycle tires. Give it that run-in, bed-in period, you know, to not give it that and then complain afterwards that this thing delaminated or didn't work. You know, you can't really, because you haven't looked after the tire and you've spent the money on it. You know, take that extra little time, like I said, 100 Ks. You know, you can do that in a day. Not a lot of riding your tire, and the benefit, the longevity that you get out of that from that 100 Ks is just it's beyond. So, other general questions that I have with regards to load ratings, tire pressures, and how they affect the carcass. And I think this is another note that people don't realize: the actual carcass needs to be looked after on tires. You know, hot versus cold pressures. People sometimes get that wrong as well. Ideally, when do you check your pressures? Hot, cold?
Okay, so yeah, it's a very valid point. And again, let's use the Wild as an example.
Sure.
Because that's the tire that the guys do drop the pressures.
Yes.
Now, you know, the other problem is when you get back onto the tar, depending what you've ridden on, if your pressures are lower, obviously there's a lot of flex in that carcass, there's a lot of movement in the carcass, and there's a lot of heat buildup, which, as we know, hot air is far more expansive than cold air. So you'll check your pressures, inflate to, let's say, 2.9 bar on the rear before you get onto the tar. By the time you stop the next morning, it's down at 2.3. So it's better to run cold pressure before the tire's gotten warmer, and it allows it to actually run at that temperature. It will increase slightly, obviously, as it heats up, but there's not going to be as much movement on that carcass. And then, obviously, the other thing is that the guys need to be aware of is the speed ratings on this type of tire and how it relates to the heat buildup as well. This is all the Anarchy Wild tires are R and S rated, which is 170 and 180 k's an hour respectively. And you've got to stick to those manufacturer's requirements. You can't put it on a 1290 and go and do 240 and expect the tire to actually last and survive. You've got to stick to the requirements or the recommendations of the tire manufacturer and the speed rating specifically. And the other problems, obviously, as you know, when we do a venture ride trip, we've got all our luggage, we've got half the time our missus on the back. So if you are running it at slightly lower pressures, the flex and the movement in the carcass can compromise that tire's integrity as well.
That's what I was going to ask you now. You know, how noteworthy is it that underinflated tires could seriously cause a problem, not only for your safety out on the actual bike riding, but damaging your tire, literally almost halving the lifespan of your tire?
No, well, absolutely. I mean, that heat buildup, and, you know, people don't, it's like anything. You take remember when we were kids, we had those little shatterproof rulers.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
take
yeah.
that thing, flex, and you feel how hot it gets.
Yes, yeah.
And eventually it breaks.
Snaps. Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing as a tire.
Okay.
If you've got that much flex in the carcass, something's got to give
Sure.
at the end of the day,
Sure.
and it does affect your tire life hugely, and potentially risk other issues as well with that tire.
I think what people also need to take into consideration when you buy the Wild, yes, and it's adventure bike tire. People obviously sometimes have this misperception. Well, I've got an adventure bike. I put an adventure bike tire. I can go adventure. It's a knobbly at the end of the day. You can't have your Michelin MotoGP slick kind of grip on that knobbly in the dry. So you've got to be open-minded. I think a little bit more than maybe other applications when it comes to adventure bike tires, because there's a reason why there's the Anarchy Adventure and the Anarchy Wild, because you've got to take in, if you're doing more road riding, adventure. If you're doing more hardcore off-road, you go wild. So really take those into note. And I think that's why we've covered over the last couple of episodes on the tire brand specifically. These are what's out there. Ryan, we've touched upon the tire pressures. You've given us a little bit more information into the technology and how important it is, especially that run-in period, and looking after the speed rating, the application, making sure you look after it, because at the end of the day, you're spending the money on the tire. Look after it and get the most out of it. And like I said, before you jump onto social media, which we all do, because we're all keyboard warriors, get the valuable information. So we hope that we've explained as much information as we possibly can across the brands, especially now with the new Michelin tires. Ryan, thank you so much for coming in from Autocycle Centre, who are the official distributors of Michelin. And up next we will have a roundup show with myself and Bruce DeCock from Bike Tyre Warehouse, just delving into the 3 episodes that we've had and a little bit more information.